Hey, what's happening guys? In this video, I want to cover threading macros in Clojure. Let's get to it. Okay, awesome. So I've already started a project and I've already evaluated this vector. It's just a vector of products where each product contains an ID, a name, a type, a stock count, a unit size, a price, and a status. So these are the threading macros I want to cover. I want to cover the thread last macro, the thread first, the as thread macro, the conditional thread macro, and the sum thread macro. So let's start with the thread last macro. So I think now, imagine we wanted to discount a particular kind of product. So let's say it must have the most stock, it must be of type furniture, and it has to have a unit size large. Let's see how we would do that without threading macros. I'll define a function here. I'll say product to discount, and this will take in our products. And the first thing we want to do is we want to filter out only the furniture products. So we'll run filter, and this takes in a function. I'll make it an anonymous function that checks to see if our type of our product, so that's referenced as a percentage sign, is equal to furniture. And this loops over our products. So we can actually run this as we go. So let's say product to discount, and we'll just pass through our products. So make sure everything is evaluated. Cool, okay, so now we're just getting our furniture products out. So we want to filter out products with a unit size of large. So let's run filter on the result of this. So we filter out, and again, we need another anonymous function here, and this will check to see if the type of our product, not the type, if the unit size of our product is large. Just evaluate that, and now we see the unit size is also large. Cool. Then what I want to do is order these by stock count, the greatest to lowest. So if we wrap this in a sort by, and we want to sort by our stock count. So now this is taking the map as a result of these two filters and sorting it by stock count. And if we run this, let's go to our REPL here. Okay, we can see that it's sorting out from lowest, because this has the lowest, to highest. So we want to reverse that. So then let's again wrap this in a reverse, run this, and now if we check this out again, okay, cool. Now we see we're getting stock count 20, yep, stock count 20, and then stock count 10. And then what we want to do is we just want to take the first product. So to do that, we can just wrap this whole thing in a first function, and now that will return us the first product in the sequence. So we evaluate this and evaluate this. Cool. And now we get our product to discount. But the thing is, this looks not so great, and it can look a lot nicer if we use the thread last macro. So what the thread last macro does is it takes our first value that we pass to it, and then it passes it as the last argument to the following form. So we want to use this filter form as our first function. So we can grab this out. And now instead of passing products through here, it will automatically be passed through via the thread last macro. So then the result of this form will be passed through as the last argument to the following form, which will be this, and so on. So then we can also take out the sort by, and then the reverse, and then the same thing with first. And now if we evaluate this, we should get the same result. Cool. So what's happening here is products is being passed through as the last argument to this filter. The result of this filter function is going to be passed through as the last argument to the following function, and then the result of that as the argument to this function, and then the result of that to this one, and the result of that to this one. And that's thread last. Now let's look at the thread first macro. So we can use the thread first macro to populate the first argument of functions. So let's create a function here to sell a product. So define function, and I'm going to call it sell product. And this is going to take in a product as well as a buyer, let's say. And what we want to do is when we sell a product, we want to decrease the stock count of a product, and we want to add that buyer to like a list of buyers of the product. So I'm going to use a let binding. And the first thing I want to do is I want to get the current stock count of the product. So we can get stock count, and we're just going to grab the stock count from the product. Then I want to get the current buyers out of the product, so I can go current buyers, and I want to default to an empty vector, so I'm going to use the get function. So I'm going to get buyers from product, and if it doesn't exist, I want it to be an empty vector. And then I want to add our buyer to this list of buyers, so I'm going to make updated buyers. So the updated buyers is just going to conjoin onto our current buyers, the buyer, and then the updated stock count is just going to be the stock count minus 1. So minus stock count 1. And those are all the values we need. So then the thread first macro will take in our product, and it is going to first associate the new stock count with the product. So we're going to assoc. Normally it would be like this. So assoc product stock count and then updated stock count. But because we're using the thread first macro, we don't need to populate this argument here, so we can take it away. We also just need to put this inside the let binding. Right now it's out. Cool. Then what we want to do is we also want to associate the buyers. So we can go assoc. Normally we'd have product here, but that product is actually the result of this. So we're going to leave it out. And you can say we're going to associate buyers with our updated buyers. Save this. And then we have the product, but now we also just need a way to get a single product. So I'm going to define a function here called define get product by ID, and that's going to take in an ID. And I'm also going to use the thread last macro here, and we're going to pass down the products, and then we want to filter out all the products with our ID, which will only be 1. So filter, and I'm going to use an anonymous function here. I'm going to make sure that the ID of the product, so we're going to take the ID, and this will represent the product and the ID that we passed down. And then I just want to get the first one, so we can evaluate that. And now what we can do is if we sell a product, so we can say sell product and then get product by ID, let's say 2, and then say the buyer is Dan. It evaluated, but it doesn't show here, so we can see it here. Cool, we've added our buyer to the product and we've decreased the stock count by 1. And that's the thread first macro. So product is being passed along as here. Then the result of this is being passed along here. And that's what thread first is doing. So now let's look at the as thread macro. Let's say I want to write a function that creates a review of a product. So let's make a function here called create product review. And that takes in a product ID. And what we want to do is we want to as thread. So the way the as thread macro works is it allows us to assign the result of the previous form to a variable. So we can start with assigning the result of our first form to the variable p. So I'm going to say get product by ID. I'm going to get product 3. And I'm going to assign it to the variable p. Then what I want to do is I want to get the name out of p. So I can use the name keyword and I can get it from p. Now the value of this is assigned to the variable p. So then I want to create a string, and I want to say this and then the name. So the name is now going to be p. This is so awesome. Evaluate this, and now we can say create product review, and we can pass through. Oh no! Instead of passing hard coding the ID here, let's just pass it through. Evaluate that. And then we can go, this desk is so awesome, or we can, this toaster is so awesome. And then we've created a function to create a review. Cool. So what's happening is this form is being assigned to the variable p. Then we can use that p value in our following function. Then the result of this is going to be assigned to the variable p. Then we can use that variable in the following function. And then the result of this string is actually also going to be assigned to p, but we don't use it. We just return it, and it creates our review for us. And that's as threading. So next up, I want to look at the conditional thread. So it looks like this. And you also get conditional thread last. But I'm going to look at conditional thread first. I'm not going to make a function here. I'm just going to make a convoluted example. So let's get a product. I'm going to use a let binding. Let's get a product. So get product by ID. And I'll just get the second product. And then let's check to see if the product is active. So I'm going to use is active. And is active is just going to check to see whether the status of our product is active. So we can say equals, and I'm going to get the status out of our product. I'm going to check to see if that is equal to active. And then I also want to check to see whether it's a special, and that will just check to see if the special key is true. So we can say is special, and that just gets the special key out of our product. So now let's use the conditional thread. So conditional thread also takes the starting value, in that case our product, and then what it does is it checks to see whether our value is truthy. If it's truthy, then it runs the following form. So we check to see if the product is active, then we can run, let's say we want to associate a new status, and let's make it inactive. And then we can check to see if it is a special. You can also put a question mark here. If it is special, then we can maybe dissociate the special key. And then we can run this. So you can see we've actually updated the status of product number 2 because it was active. But if we made it something else, let's change the status to like, I don't know, some random string, reevaluate this, then rerun this, then we don't update the status. Just get rid of that, save this, and now I want to check out product number 5 because it is special. So let's get up ID 5, and we can see we've updated the status, and we've also removed the is special, well, the special key, and that's because it was special. So how this works is we thread product, and then we check to see if this form evaluates to a truthy value, then we run the following. Then the value here gets passed down to the next form. So if we had another thing here, which was true, then, and let's say this one was false, then this would get evaluated, this wouldn't get evaluated. So the result of this form would be passed through as the first function here. So if we had another dissociate, and let's just dissociate the ID, and we run this, then we can see we've dissociated the ID, but we haven't dissociated special. But if we make this true, run this, we can see we've dissociated special and we've dissociated the ID. And if we make these both false, neither of these following forms would run. And yeah, we haven't, go back here, we still have the ID, we still have special, and we still have status. So that's the conditional thread. And now I also want to, let's just revert all of that. So now the last threading macro I want to look at is the sum thread. And it looks like this. I'm going to use sum thread last, but you actually also get sum thread first. So I'm first going to use the sum thread macro without using the sum thread. So I'm just going to use the thread last macro, and that'll show what the sum thread macro does. So I'm going to take through my products, and then I want to filter out only the active products. So I'm going to filter, and I'm going to pass through an anonymous function here, which checks to see if the status of the product is active. And if we run this, we could see we'll only have active products. And then what I want to do is I want to get the product to discount. And we know that the product to discount takes in a vector of products. So let's do that here. Product to discount. We don't need to wrap it in brackets because it only takes one argument. So we can do that. And then we get a couch. That's our product to discount. Then I want to grab the ID from that product. So let's get the ID here. Cool, and that's 2. And then I want to create our review. So we can use the create product review function, and this will create our product review. Cool, this couch is so awesome. But let's say, for instance, we had a status here which didn't exist. So this doesn't exist. Then the result of this is going to be null. So let's see what happens here. We're just basically passing null to product to discount. Then this is getting the ID of null. So it's basically doing this, ID of null. And that returns null. And then we're creating a product review, with null. So let's do some logging here. So I'm just going to print line 1 is equal to, and say 2 is equal to, 3 is equal to, and then 4. So now if we run this function and we go to our output, we can see we start with our products, then we get an empty sequence back from filter. Then we get a null back for 3. So this will return null because we're passing an empty sequence through to this function. And then 4 is also null because we're getting the ID of a null value. So if we wanted this to not continue executing when one of these functions returns null, all we have to do is add sum here. Cool, so if we evaluate this now, we can see that we get a null return, and that's because if any of these forms return a falsy value, then it's just going to break out and return null. It won't continue processing any of the forms. So this filter is actually going to return a falsy value. It returns an empty vector. So now if we check our output, we see we only return here. It goes here, we get our products, then this returns a falsy value, so we don't continue processing and we just return null. And that's how the sum thread works. And you can use it with thread first and with thread last. And that's Clojure threading. I hope you guys got a good understanding of them. And there are going to be plenty more videos to come. So cheers guys.